Hello, everyone. My name's Hank Sutala,
And I'm Sean Edward Phillips.
and we're here with Conversations with God, Book 4 discussion group, Awaken the Species. All right, so just taking a moment, and if you're catching us, if you want to take a moment and share the stream with whoever you feel might get a little bit of use out of it or lightness in their life, please do so. And also know that depending on the page, you might see a note in the description that says if you want to comment, click over to the YouTube channel. If you see that, that means we're only going to see your comments if you're commenting on YouTube, just for the way that we're streaming. But, uh-oh. I hear myself. Oh no, there we go. Let me turn that off. So for everybody who doesn't know, kind of giving you a little bit of a brief overview, Conversations with God is a huge collection of work at this point. It started with 3 books, which was called the CWG Trilogy. I read my first one way back in 1997, completely changed my life. And then he wrote a series of 6 books after that, which he called the Cosmology, which are all direct channelings. And then basically he's a writer, so he wrote 1 book a year. And then in 2016, he woke up again right around the same time that he was waking up every morning for this work. If you didn't know, every morning he would wake up at the same time, go, and he would start writing and having this dialogue with God.
Yeah.
And he said, basically, I thought this was done. You said there was only, we were done with these dialogues. And it said, basically, where we're at this time as a species, there was a need for a 4th book. And that's what brings us to today. The 4th book is called Awaken the Species. And I'm hearing myself talk in the background. That's weird. Okay. I think Spirit's just messing with me. So,
and Awaken the Species actually came out in 2016. So this isn't exactly a brand new work, but it really came up for Hank and I as we were doing the CWG group. And Hank started saying, book 4's been out, and neither of us had really looked at it. And then all of a sudden the energy was just like pulling like crazy towards doing something with book 4. So like pretty much at the same time, like without really talking to each other, Hank and I both like downloaded it on Kindle and like read the first few chapters, and we're like, well, this is amazing. And we talked about it, I think, ad nauseum in Power of Possibilities. It really turned into, hey, come join us for book club at today for this one. So I'm super excited to be talking about it because there's just some really cool stuff.
Right. And if you haven't read the book, don't worry, you can hang with us still. We're going to create context around the different concepts, but really to sum it up, what we're going to be going through is the process of human doings changing into human beings and the species really becoming awakened. And if you like to make comments, either ask questions or offer your contribution, we welcome that. If you're a member of the Conversations with Consciousness group, there is a link for you if you want to come on stream with us and ask your questions and interact on video. You do have that as an option. Otherwise, you can feel free just to chat. We can pull your chats up on the side here. In fact, I'll just give you an example. Mike Skilton is checking in saying howdy. I think he was trying to say howdy, and then
or he's asking how we're going to do it all, how we're going to awaken the species.
Yeah,
we're you what, Mike, you're in the right place, because we're going to talk about what Neil talked about with God about how to do that.
Very cool. So, where do you want to get started, or should we talk a little bit first about where we probably covered where the work came from enough, right? Or do you think we need to?
Yeah, we have a few times. I wanted to throw a note out, mostly internal, Hank. I just realized my computer has to apply updates in about 20 minutes, so I will need to do some technical switcheroo. I'll probably switch over to my mobile in about 20 minutes. So
you can't like tell it to wait a couple hours or something?
No, unfortunately I'm doing it on a laptop. I don't have full permission over that and it's gonna just do that for me.
AKA he's using his work computer. How naughty. I love it.
I didn't say that.
I did.
You did.
All right. Yes,
I won't say that you're incorrect. I will not say you're correct.
What is it? Plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
There you go. So we got that.
Yes.
So if at any time you do want to comment, ask questions, offer your contribution, please do so. And in a nutshell, just to give you the bare bones of where the work came from, Neil ran into a huge hard time in his life. He lost his wife. He had physical issues. He was literally living in a homeless camp where he was collecting like cans and stuff to trade in for enough money to pay the rent to stay at the camp. And he had finally gotten enough money to get an apartment, or he got a job, a part-time job as a disc jockey, and finally got enough money to get out of the camp and get an apartment. And he goes to work one day and he goes to open the door to the building and it's locked, and there's a sign that says bankrupt, right? They just closed out, no notice. And he went home and he wrote a scathing letter to God, writing like, is this really how life is supposed to work? And just kind of really getting animated over it. And when he described it in his workshop that I took, he first said that he heard an audible voice that was like, do you really want an answer to these questions, or are you just venting? And he's like, well, yeah, I want an answer to these questions. And what that turned into this dialogue back and forth where he would ask a question and they get an impulse from spirit to write a response. And that's what became the Conversations with God dialogue. And don't get caught up on the word God. If you want to use the word source, universe, life force, whatever word works for you, God is just a word that he used to describe it because he had a huge background in Catholicism and that type of thing. But the work changed my life for sure. And when I read it, and it planted the seeds as I got sober and everything, that I had some tools to use as I started to step into my own awakening, which brings us to now Awaken the Species, which is book 4.
Yeah.
Cool.
And for my own stuff, I didn't get started with CWG as early as Hank. I'm kind of a newcomer. I think I really got acquainted with the works last year, and it resonated so much with the other tools that we use. I'm familiar with from Access Consciousness. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Hank, can I come hang out with you once a month or once a week and talk about CWG? And it's been really fun. A lot of good truths and just awarenesses. So let's talk about it. Let's jump in. I think we've done enough exposition.
Yeah.
Let's jump in.
One final thing I want to say is we've been having the group now in person and now virtually since April 2008. So over a decade now that we've been having the group. So welcome. And we do it. We're going to be doing this third and fourth Tuesday for the book discussion. And then the first Tuesday of the month is our normal CWG discussion, which is all the material. So you're welcome to join us for any and all of that. I think I got that right. That's what we had chosen, right? Or is that news to you?
I think for the book club will be the third and fourth Tuesday, because the second Tuesday is Power Possibilities.
Right.
Regardless, pretty much every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, Hank and I will be on talking about something really fun.
Pretty much. Tuesday night is Hank and Sean Day.
Most nights it will be CWG related.
Right. So this is the book. Now we're not going to read it verbatim because we get in trouble if we just like read books online, because of course it's copyrighted material and all that good stuff. But we're kind of going to go through just to jog our own memory with what the book was talking about. So let me. Yeah. Was there a particular place that stood out from what you read that?
Well, I don't know. I came prepared. I've got a book of handwritten notes from each of the chapters, so I'm on point today.
Oh, great. Well, we'll dive into your notes then. But one thing that what I'm reading right here that I had never known until I was listening to this book, because I got it on Audible in addition to Kindle, that the time that he woke up every day, he would wake up in between 4:15, and it was right around his time of birth. And that's really significant in metaphysics, because they say that with the time, well, with the year anyway, that is like your solar return. That's like a moment where you have this divine inspiration. So the fact that every day he was waking up at the same time with this inspiration to bring through this work, I would invite you to see when you were born and see if around the same time every day you might be getting some sort of inspiration from your divine self to work with. So anyway, what's on your notes, Sean? Where should we dive in?
Yeah, really cool that that Neil was waking up at his time of birth when he looked up his birth certificate. That was really funny. I got a chuckle of that. It's like in the introduction section to the book. It's quite funny. Just the congruence of it all. There's a lot of good stuff. I thought chapter 2, as we're kind of just covering the first 5 chapters for this week, Man, where to jump in chapter 2? I think the part that jumped out, and there's a whole lot happening. I mean, just within chapter 2, I think I have 10 bullets of like cool things that they talk about. Um, what jumped for me though is they sort of to awaken. Well, it's awakening. What does awakening mean? That's a lot of this dialogue is like, okay, what is awaken? What is this whole awaken thing? And God kind of lays it out for Neo in the sense that it's awakening to the idea that you are already awake.
Kind of a
So
paradox.
yeah, just think about it. It's like it's awakening to the idea that you're already awake. And God kind of goes into this whole uh, divine dichotomy discussion of like, well, how can you be like kind of like you're saying, it's like how can you be awake if you're not awake? It's really knowing that you're awake that is really the point of awakening the species. And Um, I thought that was a good starting place to jump from. Um, and that struck me um, quite a bit. And with the being awake kind of idea, that the conversation goes that the purpose of being awake is about personal evolution. So there's sort of like a couple layers to it. And personally, I had this. I wasn't sure really where I had awareness, or there's still a lot for me to process with. There is this personal evolution piece that they talk about, and I get that. It's kind of this idea of like you need to take care of yourself. You need to get what's working for you down, awaken for yourself. What will create the most for you? What's creating in your life? What's generative for you as kind of the starting point. And then after that, it starts to encompass more of this as a species and as a whole awareness and awakening of the species idea, which of course is the whole book title. And maybe just taking a second, Hank, to talk about that from your perspective, with the idea of the personal evolution and kind of the self first idea before we jump into the similar related topic of like the as a species awakening.
Yeah, well, in general, one of the things that I really like to kind of make the distinction between is there's a difference between self first and selfish. And when you're really awakening, one of the things is that you become aware that you take care of yourself first. Just like think of the airplane when they give you the instructions if the little mask comes down. They say you take care of yourself first and then you can take care of others. And that's not being selfish. It's not at the expense of someone else, because if you don't do that, then you might be unconscious and can't help anyone. So the first thing as you're awakening is seeing, what do I need to do to take care of me so that I could be the best me and be 100% authentic with who I am in the world? And then what could I do to take that and share it with everyone? And that's where like Neil talks later in the book about how just doing something like that, and then you're affecting your community, and then that community is affecting a larger community. It creates this ripple effect of awakening and of
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, because
Yeah,
yeah, you kind
I
of get
wanted to
yourself
grab
in.
that for a second. This rippling effect that you're talking about, Hank, where it's like you start with yourself and then it grows. That can seem. I perceive that can feel like overwhelming. Like, oh my god, like I'm gonna have all this responsibility. And it's really this idea of having ease with the whole, like a level of ease with it. And even in the conversation Neil and God have, is that God puts out that it's easy. It's not a hardship to change. That it's gonna it can come very naturally and very easily, this awakening process. Um, And I'm just so much in the flow with that sort of idea right now that it just struck me, or it started to really become apparent. I've started to awaken to the idea that, you know, a level of ease is okay. It's actually one of the greatest contributions that we can give ourselves, is that, you know, sort of just starting to allow things to happen. It's not this idea that you set out to awaken the species. It's that you choose to start where you start, and that you're already coming from a point of view that you're awakened, and it's just tapping into it more. And just by doing that, you can impact so much more. And I just think that's so fun to play with and just get an energy around and just feel like, wow, um, just being.
In the way you mentioned that, something to keep in mind if you start diving into this work is to not get caught up on the vocabulary used or the word choices. The word choices are great, but one of Neil's quotes that I've heard him say in person anyway, not sure which book it's from, but he says, language is the feeble attempt to put words of the allness to the isness. Essentially saying you're trying to take something that's so far beyond words and distill it down into words. And in the regular trilogy, he started by when asking God, "Hey, why don't you talk to everybody?" And God said, "I do talk to everybody all the time. It's a question of who listens." And that words was the last resort because words are so often misunderstood because we have all these points of view around what they mean. And how Sean was saying, get the energy around it. So as you read through it, don't just look at the words. The words point to an energy. What's the energy that's underneath it? Because that's what's going to give you the experience of what he's
Or
writing about.
what's the intent, or what's your
Right.
awareness behind those words? Now, you may have to get past some of the thoughts and ideas you may have around the word, but really sitting down and being present and saying, okay, what are they really speaking to here? And just getting an answer sort of in your, you know, it's it'll sort of be like a feeling, but it's really energy, and it's like, oh, I've kind of got this sense of this flow or this vibration that they're talking about, and that's what to go towards, not necessarily any of the particular word choices that are in any language going to be inadequate to describe something as phenomenal as as, you know, God's intention, or a divine essence. You know, the words can't describe.
And an interesting question to ask if people, when the religions were forming, could have gotten around the energy behind something instead of caught up with the words of something, there might not be as many religions because they might have had more of a
Mhm.
commonality with what is this really about
Yeah,
instead of getting caught up with, well, no, because I got it this way through my filters and you got it this way through your filters.
yeah.
One of
So
us has to be wrong.
you're sort of jumping into chapter 5, Hank,
Oops,
where
sorry.
Neil calls out. Well, you know, it's all about. I actually had some notes that the chapters are sort of related. So chapter 5 actually ends up going pretty well with chapter 2. You know, and Neil calls out. You know, all the societal things that are in place, spiritual systems and political systems and economic systems, and how the way they're currently constructed, that as a species, you know, they're not really that well structured to be supportive of the species. You know, he starts to name all these figures about, you know, you've got 1.5 billion people or 1.6 billion people without water and electricity and starvation rates. And this is where it starts to, you know, it's definitely delving away from the personal evolution in talking more about the species, and that, you know, if you're at a point, you know, or if you're really looking at this from an awareness of what's happening on the planet, it's like, and then putting it in some sort of bizarre context of like, well, as a species, where would we really like to be? It's like, well, have we sat down and really asked, or have you asked yourself in your personal experience, like, what would you like the planet and the species to look like? You know, would it be 1.5 billion people not having electricity. And that's not saying that you need to go out to Africa and start a lighting company and infrastructure projects. Like, that's not what this saying. It's just getting thinking and asking questions about what would you like it to look like, or how would you, in your ideal, sense of the planet and the species, would this be a reality? And that's part of what being awakened is about, is drawing attention to some of the questions that maybe we haven't asked, or seeing figures in data that maybe we haven't had before. God even makes a reference to social media in the chapter,
I don't know if I remember that.
Yeah, because part of it is, now is the time, which is totally a theme in these first 5 chapters, where part of that is like social media and stuff. A lot of the problems that are prevalent today were prevalent 20, 50 years ago, but not as many people were aware of them or knew they were out there. But now, with how quickly we can transfer information and communicate with cell phones and social media and all these devices, it's like, how many more people now are aware of these, I'm going to say problems, but how many people are aware of these things that are going on in the planet compared to 20 or 50 years ago? And that's part of how come a lot of the conversation in the first 2 chapters is like, now's the time. There is a lot of people on the planet asking for a change right now.
Right. In fact, I think he was alluding to that, like unconsciously, the people have been screaming for or not even unconsciously, consciously, people have been desiring this change, which is what opened up. There was a whole part in chapter 1, I believe, or maybe it was the intro, where Neil's like saying, well, who's inviting who here? And God was basically saying, well, you all invited me. People have been demanding change.
Yeah.
It is I who am answering you, not the other way around. And
chapter 2.
When I just got, okay, and I got goosebumps as I said that. But and one of Neil's favorite quotes, and he wrote this in a book that he autographed for me, and he said, if, and this is what actually started me with this whole group. I had told him I'm in this year-long program of his, the life skills program, to learn how to facilitate groups, and I was going to wait the whole year before I held my first one. And as he was signing the book, he looked at me and he said, if not you, who? If not now, when? And I came home and I started the group like the next week, and I didn't wait. And that's what, starting to follow that impulse of the soul, because now is the time. Anyhow, getting excited about that kind of thing.
Yeah. And the impulse of the soul that Hank just mentioned, that they do talk about it in this book, and I wrote it down. It's chapter 4. They talk about this idea of the fundamental impulse, and it kind of starts with some dialogue about survival is not your basic instinct, that the basic instinct is actually the expression of true identity, which is divinity. That's the true basic instinct, and it's described as a fundamental impulse.
Yeah, and he gives this example that when the chips are down and someone's faced with hearing a baby inside a burning building, in that moment you're not worried about your survival, because in the depths of your soul you know that you're infinite and that there's nothing that can happen to you. Consciousness is continuous, and you run in and save the baby. And you put aside all the fears about survival, because all that in that moment, when you're congruent, it just goes out the window, and you make a choice from the space of the soul.
Yeah. And then that cascades into a whole thing where Neil then says, every moment needs to be a burning, building moment. And if we function from that space and that place, how different would things be?
Definitely.
If you were making choices like that, like running into a burning building because, to save a child or an infant, like, we're just in that, I'm going to do it because that is like that's being, it's this the fundamental impulse that they talk about. It's like, if every moment was like that, or we operated from a space where every moment was like that, that's the awakening that they're describing, or that as we change and awaken the species, consciously more and more people will be operating and creating from that space rather than, whatever we're creating from now.
Right. And once we start creating from that space and you're impacting your community, going back to that example, it starts this exponential ripple effect. So
Yeah.
how much of you can you be, and how much could that be as an example to others? And Neil says, and not just in this book, but other books, the fastest way to receive something that you're looking to create in your life is to cause another to have it. So if you're looking to awaken yourself, help another to become awakened, because in a way you're acknowledging that you have that energy to give someone, and it helps you step into it yourself. So even having a discussion group like this is all ways that you can help to not just awaken yourself, but awaken those around you.
Yeah, totally. Well, Hank, I'm going to take a second and I think maybe do my technology changeover here. So if you want to maybe just hold the fort for a second, I'm going to get switched over.
Okay, I shall hold the space. And this would be a great time if anybody has a question or a comment, anything at all about what we've talked about now. Go ahead and, I see Sean in studio twice. This is kind of trippy. Anyway, but if you have any comments or questions, feel free to make them. If you're watching in one of the groups that this was shared to, or some of the pages, if you want to make for us to be able to see your comments in studio, you need to go to the YouTube stream. If you're on my profile, Conversations with Consciousness, or Periscope, we can see it. Any of the other places, we won't see the comments unless you click through to that YouTube link, and then we can see them. So let me know if you got any questions. And if you'd like to pick up a copy on Amazon or library or whatnot and catch up, we're going to be doing chapters 6 through 10 next week. And or just show up and listen to us. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. We're doing the heavy lifting by going through the book for you. Does anybody have any questions? I know Mike's listening, but he might be driving too. And Rini is listening as well. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, I'm stalling for Sean. Let's see. What would be the favorite part so far? I kind of get some of the later chapters caught up with the beginning chapters. So I'm seeing if there's something that I want to bring up. Actually, let's do that. One of the things that I highlighted just to kind of hit home with it, I don't remember where it was now. Chapter 5, let's go to. Oh, you can't search for chapter 5, really? Well, let's do billion. This was the part that I wanted to bring up. So this is where he was just talking about where we are as a species, such as the fact that more than 1.5 billion people in this very moment do not have electricity in the 21st century, such as the fact that a higher number, over 1.6 billion, do not even have access to clean water, such as the fact that a much higher number still, over 2.5 billion, do not have toilets. Now, some of this may seem like simply inconveniences, but these conditions have enormous implications. More than 19,000 children die each day on this planet from preventable health issues such as malaria, diarrhea, and pneumonia. Now, granted, this is in 2016, so these numbers may have shifted. So, and then I was just thinking about there's the scene in Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams, and he's going through all these different voices and everything. Oh, I need to bring you back on, don't I, Sean? Hi, Sean.
Oh, I'm back. How about that? How's it getting better?
I forgot you didn't have access to the board. Anyway.
Sorry, you can just cut me out of the rest of the broadcast.
Yeah, well, it's more fun with you here.
This was I don't know. You're on a roll talking about Mrs. Doubtfire and
right. So Mrs. Doubtfire.
So.
Yeah. So there's this one thing where he's speaking like an alien. He's like, "Oh, we came to this planet looking for intelligent life," and then look around and see that kind of stuff, and he's like, "Oops, we made a mistake," and they go off. So like, what would if there's other species and things like that in this cosmos? What would they think of where we're at and what our choices are? I'm just curious. I mean, that's kind of leading into what we're probably going to talk about in next week's book discussion.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think. I think I'm mixing shows now. I think last week we pulled up a section about different species and planets and stuff.
Yeah, it was talked about in book 3, which we covered quite a bit in Power of Possibilities. I can bring that book up if we want. Do we want to?
No, I don't think we need to, but I think there was a parallel from our last get together.
Yeah. And in book 3, just to give you a background of the original 3 books, book 1 is personal truths, book 2 is global, and book 3 is more universal. And in book 3, they talk about HEBs is the acronym they use, which stood for highly evolved beings. And
No, I
what's
think
that?
it was the end of book 2. I thought it was
Okay.
the last chapter of book 2 that there was some comments about that.
Last chapter of book 2,
It's
maybe.
like chapter 22, maybe. I have a pretty good memory.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember, 10 years of reading these things. I just don't have the same memories.
Well, for some of us, it's nice and fresh. We get this great awareness.
Well, there's
Well,
only chapter 20, and then it stops. But they're starting to talk about book 3 at the end of book 2.
yeah, I think it was in that chapter 20.
Yeah, but this is really good though. This is just from chapter 20 of book 2 that I'm going to just read real quick. When Neil was asking him about solving the 2 biggest problems of the human experience. And God says, well, I've discussed them over and over again in this book. To summarize, then, most, if not all, the world's problems and conflicts, and all of your problems and conflicts as individuals, would be solved and resolved if you as a society would, 1, abandon the concept of separation, and 2, adopt the concept of visibility. Never see yourself again as separate from one another, and never see yourself as separate from me. Never tell anything but the whole truth to anyone, and never again accept anything less than your grandest truth about me. Anyway, that just kind of stood out to read, but I'm looking for the other Hebes. Oh, he's talking about Jesus was a spaceman. That's what you were probably thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I knew it. I had it right, too. I got the right chapter. Booyah.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. So Neil was asking, you mean that Buddha, Krishna, Jesus were spacemen? And God says, you said that. I didn't. And Neil says, is it true? And God says, is this the first time you've heard that thought? No, but is it true? And then God says, do you believe these masters existed somewhere before they came to earth and returned to that place after their so-called death? Yes, I do. And where do you suppose that is? And Neil says, I'd always thought it was where we call heaven. I thought they came from heaven. And where do you suppose heaven is? And Neil says, I don't know. In another realm, I guess. And then God says, another world? Yes, oh, I see. But I would have called it the spirit world, not another world as we know it, not another planet. And God says, it is the spirit world, yet what makes you think those spirits, those holy spirits, cannot or would not choose to live somewhere else in the universe, just as they did when they came to your world? Very cool. Was there something in particular that you were remembering from that was really striking?
Not particularly. I just thought it tied into whatever we just mentioned. So, and
Yeah.
it's funny because they talk about spacemen and Jesus, and I laugh because I'm like, that's such a funny idea. I'm like, I wonder if it's true.
Well, I mean, he was walking on water and everything. I mean, what human could do that? It's got to be some
Yeah.
alien ability, right?
Yeah. Or, the only other parallel I could think to that is like if you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z,
It always comes back to anime or Marvel.
it always comes back to anime and Marvel, but in Dragon Ball Z, Goku ends up dying at least twice, maybe once, I don't know, a bunch of times, but basically where he goes when he dies is just like another realm. Like, and it's like no big deal that he like died. It's like, we'll just bring him back with the Dragon Balls. Because he's just like in a different space in reality. It's not really like you die. It's just like how you go somewhere else for a bit.
And Mike, I'm not sure what you're referring to with Lucy. Mike's we love
The
Magic
movie.
Mike. Oh, that's a movie? Okay, cool.
Yeah, the movie Lucy. Unfortunately, I actually have not seen it. I've been told in terms of sci-fi and stuff, it's pretty good.
And just for your awareness, I can still hear you, but it looks like you froze. Your face. It's like you're a ventriloquist. Oh, there you're back. Cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the back on my laptop. Up. Yeah.
It's all right. Very
Apologies,
cool.
everyone, for the technical shuffle.
Well, you did pretty good, other than me not adding you back on the stream.
You know.
It happens. Cool, cool. So let me go back to. So with your notes there from the book 4, I know you said you had quite a few bullet points. What haven't we covered yet that was on your list?
Yeah, I can answer that. Let me flip back to my computer here.
Sure.
If you can just let me into the studio.
Yep. Let's see what happens. We have double shot. Oh my gosh, this is so weird. It's like multiple realities colliding.
Oh dear, that's terrifying. There it goes. It's like there's multiple of me. So yeah, what else did I have in my bullets? So I did have quite a few bullets. We talked about quite a few of them. I think one of the things that I thought was a good takeaway, or a nice takeaway from I'll make it so it looks, you can see me with my notes here.
You look very official.
I'm very official. I took notes. The only thing is I have this sun glare coming in. I apologize for that too. Book 2, going back to book 2, which if you're reading this or just listening in, book 2 is where the conversation really starts. Book 1 is basically chapter 1 is basically the invitation to awaken the species. Only slightly dead, mostly. Sorry, I'm reading Mike's comments, making references to Monty Python. He's only mostly dead. But chapter 1 is basically just the invitation to the awaken the species idea, and then the conversation really hits its stride in book 2. And they cover a lot of ground in it. What was that, Hank?
Chapter 2, you mean?
Yeah, in chapter 2. Sorry, yeah. There's a lot of good books as well, but yeah, chapter 2 of book 4. So kind of towards the end of chapter 2, there's this whole really nice section about what about what God is, or kind of the purpose. And the quote I liked from it is, it's basically God is there to empower. Is there to empower us to have, create, express, and experience all that we wish. So it's not that God has some set outcome for the human species or anyone in particular, but God, and again, getting over the God as a word, the divinity, or however you'd like to describe it, the cosmic energy of the universe. The target is to empower, to have, and create, express, and experience all that you wish. So God's really there to empower us to experience the world that we would like to experience. So as we awaken, to me, this is really calling forward the idea that if it's about empowering, the empowerment of you to have and create and express everything that I wish or you wish, what is it that you would like to create and express? And is what's being created and expressing in your life, or for the species today, the same experience we would like to have? Or would we like to choose a different, perhaps greater experience? And I just found this a very strong and just an energetic passage that I really connected with. Was this idea of the empowerment of us to create, and that's really, at least to a degree, part of what God's purpose is, if you can say such a thing. So that was a note I had.
Very cool. I think I found the spot too. I think that was the main thing. If it means being awakened, wonderful, because it still is all about whatever you're choosing, and the energy supports that no matter what it is that you're choosing. But hopefully it's a greater possibility. And
that's kind of the point that God talks about, is like God's agenda isn't for anything to show up one way or another. I think there's something to the effect of like the true meaning of God is to experience itself, which is such a it's such a cool energy around that. Like this depictive, the way it's depicted that God's the creator and the creative, that creator and the created, and then it's about experiencing like one's own self in this like beautiful energy cycle of living. It's just like really cool, this section. So, I just ask, if anybody else kind of gets that same like, oh, it's so cool, or if you choose to read this or listen to it, like what awarenesses do you get from this particular section? Because I thought it was neat.
And God kind of goes in the original trilogy into like why all this is occurring. And the idea is that God is all there is all at once in the ever present moment of now. And in that space of the absolute oneness, there is nothing experiential. It's only contextual because it's all, you know, everything all at once. So there's nothing other than you. And so the duality is created so you can have the illusion of being something other than what you are. And one of the main quotes that's one of my favorites from the first books is, in the absence of that which you are, not. And the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. And it's in the duality that you have this ability to experience things contextually instead of just having a conceptual knowledge or experience of them. And that's where, like you said, it's all about experiencing everything there is to experience, both the creator and the created, with the intention of exploring all of what's possible.
Yeah, really cool.
You sound excited there.
Just enjoying your words. They were so nice.
Okay. Let's see. What else? Did you have any more bullet points? I should have made bullet points. Next time I'm going to be more prepared. I'm going to make bullet points as I listen so I can actually have like a list of stuff that really stood out. Because I find myself thinking about things I know are coming up in later chapters. And I'm like, no, don't go there yet.
Yeah, that was part of my game, was prep. Because I know that there's going to be a lot of chapters to cover. I kind of was drawn to some questions that I just thought would be good to pose to anybody watching or anybody that's catching this on the replay, which will be up on the Holistic Health and Healing YouTube channel, as well as on the Facebook feeds. And it was this question about a word, and as we've talked about, words are sort of slippery things.
A particular word, or talking about words in general?
No. The word I was going to say that's slippery in this case is the word civilized. And what is civilized? Because they go into this whole section. Say Hank and God go into this conversation. I suppose
Neil
that
and
is a
God?
truth. I suppose that is a truth in some degree. In this case, God is speaking with Neil, though. And this idea about civilized, and calling ourselves civilized, and how there's groups of or folks out there that say, oh, well, we're a civilized species. And it's sort of this thought of like, well, are we? Like, are we really, when we're saying that word, as words can be, are we really quote unquote civilized with all that's happening? And the references to this are around when they're talking about the 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion people on the planet with no water, no electricity. Again, those were around 2016, August 2016-ish. So those numbers could have changed. And it's like, with everything that's happening in the political systems not being supportive, and the economic systems and the spiritual systems having trouble, and everything, like, is this really a civilized place? And then coming from that, you have to start the conversation. Man, I'm not sure I want to go with the civilized thing. I thought it was an interesting,
Well, it's all point of view. There's
yeah.
I've said this on Power Possibilities, the example with Param, who is he's local to the Cleveland area. He's a professor at Baldwin Wallace. He's been on TED Talks. He's written some articles recently for the Cleveland.com. But when he does his seminars, he will give this example of a research team going to an island to study the culture of the people. And through their lenses of what they believe to be right about something or wrong about something, they see the people living in huts, and he takes a pair of glasses from someone in the audience and he says, so I'm looking at them through the lens that they're uncivilized because they're living in huts and that they are running around naked. So I'm going to say that they're primitive. And he grabs another pair of glasses and he puts them on. And so it's through whatever the lenses are from your society that you view things as civilized or uncivilized. But if you look at it through somebody else's point of view, like a highly evolved species, then that might be coming from a very different place where there is no poverty or people, everybody is taken care of because you realize that you're all one. So why wouldn't you take care of the totality of you?
Yeah. And I think that's a good way of putting it, Hank, through a different, I mean, it's strange to put on a different lens, so to say, but if you're putting on the lens of a highly evolved being or beings, like, would we be looking at civilized or the way the species is on the planet? Would we be saying it's civilized?
Or if we go back in time and you go back to the Renaissance where they're having people quartered with horses and they're doing all like putting people in stocks and leaving them there, everybody would be like, oh my gosh, well, maybe not everybody, but in general, people would be like, oh my gosh, that's so uncivilized. And if you go forward in time 1,000 years and they were to come back and look at us right now, they may say the same thing because of the new point of view they have for how far they've evolved. So just for a moment, stepping out of the space of having judgment about anything and being like, well, if there was no limitations of what I could choose, is this how I would like the world to look like? And chances are none of us would wish that people wouldn't have toilets or would be dying from very easy things that could be fixed health-wise or going hungry if there was no limitations on what you could change over, just with the wave of your hand or something like that. So maybe that's a good way to start to step into the space of what would I like the world to look like, and then how could I facilitate change in the community around me, just with what I do have my sphere of influence. What could I do to start that ripple effect out to the world?
Or to just start with yourself and see where it goes.
Start with yourself. And then once you start sharing your light, though, then you can't help but start the ripple effect.
Yes. We've come full circle.
We've come full circle. So
I did want to grab something from that, and I'm blanking on what it was because that last thing just came up. It had to do with sort of like the impoverishment and the billions of people with no toilets and stuff. And, it really came up to the point I was attempting to make earlier when I was talking about civilized, but I suppose it's all in good order. In that, getting the awareness out that there is 1.5 billion people in poverty, let's just use the number from the book. It's not a wrongness per se or a rightness, or that people should or shouldn't. And that's something that God clarifies earlier in the text. I think in chapter 2, again, there's kind of this I was going to say God, he, but she kind of clarifies, that nothing is really about whether things should or shouldn't be. Really, with this section that kind of Hank has highlighted, what the attention for me is drawn to is that, or what's called out by either Neil or or God, is that you can't solve a problem that you don't know about. Did I cut out?
You got a little pixelated.
Did I go away?
You didn't go away, but your voice got kind of pixelated.
Okay. Yeah, my computer fell asleep. But just this idea that you can't solve a problem you don't know anything about. So just having this awareness of what's really in truth happening, and that there is these kinds of things going on, that's getting to a place where we can look and ask questions and really go, okay, well, if we're the creators of our own universe, and and God's here to empower us to have, create, express, and experience all that we wish, And I now have this awareness that all this is going on the planet. And, you look, especially now in 2020, it's like, okay, is this the reality or the experience that I would like to have? And then is this how I would like, the species to look? Is that the collective experience that we'd like to have? And the overwhelming, I think, response to that is no. Right? I mean, this is not this is not the experience we'd like to have. Right? This now is the time to choose to change it. We have all this happening and all these people that are at the place saying, okay, we're on the cusp of choosing something different. Now let's actually choose it and let's be it and integrate into our lives. And I think the question I'd have for you, Hank, and then to anybody listening is, have you looked at anything like that? What awarenesses have come up for you in the last 2 months? With all the 3 months with all the COVID and Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests and all this stuff that's going on. Like, what awarenesses are becoming apparent as chances and opportunities we have that are pretty congruent with what God and Neil are describing as an opportunity to awaken the species?
Well, I'd say one thing is just our willingness with this group, and like me and Casey doing Stir Crazy Shamans, and Ryan Dean doing empathic empowerment training, or empathic empowerment live streams. They're like, we're all choosing to put ourselves out there and to be inspiration for people to start choosing, right? And one of the things, because I saw this really animated post by somebody that was basically saying F light workers, and they kind of went down to a dark space. And one of the responses Ryan had when I shared it with him is he did a whole stream saying, well, everybody has their own unique gifts in this world. And some people are the warriors. And if you're the warrior, go out. But then there's also the people that are healers, that as people are going out and advocating for change with protests or whatnot, that there's people holding space for them to recover and heal from that experience. And so one thing I would say is, like, if you look around and someone isn't choosing what you're choosing, as a response to something going on in the world, it's not that they're not doing something or not caring, but you're really, I'm inspired to let people find their inspiration of what they could share with the world, and let them start sharing that to start facilitating change, and not to get caught up on it having to look a certain way. If you're saying something needs to change, not everybody goes about facilitating that change a certain way. Like, not everybody's going downtown to protest, for example. Some of us are doing things like this. That's all still part of it and facilitating change in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But people are really, just my view, starting to judge people for doing or not doing certain things, and then saying you don't find it relevant, or you're getting the energy of what I'm talking about, right?
I totally do. And I think it was very well spoken. To let people be who they be and choose how they choose, because we all have a different way of contributing to the planet and the species, and the way I contribute and the way you contribute, Hank, or you and the audience that's listening contribute. None of us can do it the same way, even if we tried.
And I guess, and I got goosebumps as this was coming through, to say people are choosing, people are responding. And I mean, granted, there's still some people reacting in the world, but for the most part, a lot of people have really taken a moment to start driving the car again, right? We go through life on autopilot. And before COVID, where the world literally got paused and everybody said, what do I do? My robot, it had everything planned, and you had to wake up and you had to brush my teeth and eat breakfast, drive to the work where I don't even remember the drive. And now people are like, oh, I'm having to show up for my own experience. And they're actually in a space of choice, some for the first time in a long time, because they're showing up for their experience. Then they're choosing. And if we can just, at the very minimum, show up for our experience and really respond through our day instead of react, right there is probably 90% of what can really shift the world, and not let that autopilot kick back in as we go back to the new normal.
Yeah, if we just live every moment like it's a burning building moment.
Oh, great way to circle back to the text.
Nailed it.
And we're coming up on the hour mark because I'm going to be putting this on Instagram TV as well. So
Oh,
we want to
we're
make
going to
sure.
Instagram
Yeah, we're
today.
going on
Whoa.
Instagram TV, but that's
Holy
important.
smokes. I'm not
Well,
sure I'm ready. Ah.
oh no,
A good thing you told me now that we're almost an hour in.
surprise!
Too late to bail.
No, no. Well, if we go over an hour, then I got to edit the video because you can only do an hour at a time. So, like, planning these to be a little shorter than our normal groups, or maybe if we plan those to be a little shorter too, we can have a lot more places we can put it out without having to edit the group, or can stop the stream and restart the stream if we want to keep going in the future too. But any final inspirations that you want to leave everyone with? And if you are watching this on the replay, if you go to the YouTube channel and comment there, we can bring up any questions or comments in the next week. We can bring it up when we do chapters 6 through 10. So please make your comments, preferably in one place so we can find them on YouTube. Like Mike's going crazy on YouTube. He's giving us all kinds of stuff. We got unicorns. We got little Easter Island heads. He's just given us all kinds of fun things there. And but make your comments on the YouTube channel. We'll see them there, and we can circle back and bring those up on the next stream. But anything right now that you're feeling particularly inspired to share or say?
I just encourage, if you're able to, check out CWG and the Audible particularly, or maybe just the Audible.
I highly
really
recommend
good introduction. The Audible for it's really good
because it's 3 different voices. Gives you just that the way that it's done brings it to a whole nother place. Also,
and it is Neil plays himself in the role, and then they have a male and a female voice for God, which is really cool to hear. If you're someone, maybe you're not maybe you're like me, maybe you're not, where I have this headcanon of God sounding like a male, and then it's like, well, no, like, of course not. Like, and then adding Neil narrating himself gives you this sense of, it just gives you a different energy of how the conversation kind of was going for him, in sort of a way you can't get if you were to just only read it and use that as your only medium. So I'd highly encourage to check out the Audible book. And yeah, just what awarenesses do you get from the book if you pick it up and read it? And feel free to share on the YouTube chat, after the fact, or reach out to Hank and I online on Facebook or through the HHH page. Just, what did you enjoy? I've enjoyed pretty much all of chapter 2, all chapter 4, chapter 5. It's just really cool. So,
and
Hank?
if you do pick up the book, do what Sean did and make bullet points and write things out, because I totally came unprepared. I'm like, man, he's remembering all kinds of stuff, and I did not remember any of that. So come with your questions, or if you don't want to read the book but you find value from here, we're not going to say you can't watch because you didn't read it. Please show up, and if you find this valuable, also share a friend. If you're catching it halfway through and you're going to go back and start it again, start a watch party, start to help, be that ripple, choose and start to share with other people. And if you help another to become awakened, you are acknowledging that you are awake. And that's one of the fastest ways to really step into the space of starting to choose through life and respond through life instead of react through life. So how does it get any better than that?
How does it get any better than that? That is the question.
And we do have someone says, thanks for the explorations, fellas. You're very welcome. Thank you for listening. And we will be catching you next Tuesday, same time, same place, every Tuesday until we're through the book. We're going to be on stream doing something, whether it's CWG or Power Possibilities. So come join us and we'll be silly and have fun.
Yeah. Can't wait to do it. So
actually, we're way less silly tonight than normal, but anyhow.
Yeah, I have my bullets.
Yep. So let me get rid of the banner. We'll play our little, I think the Phoenix is coming out tonight. So we'll play our little Phoenix Firebird outro. Phoenix. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.